Welcome to Freedom Cast, a podcast dedicated to interviewing star icons and entrepreneurs who have encouraged others to become more healthy and active. My name is Ashton, and it's my pleasure to host you as we take another trip through the fitness industry. It's entertaining and informative, and I hope it makes fitness more exciting and special to you in your own fitness journey. Freedom Cast is supported by Freedom Fitness Equipment in Charlotte, North Carolina. Freedom Fitness Equipment serves the health and fitness community nationwide, from free weights and strength equipment for home gyms and studios to cardio and conditioning equipment for commercial spaces. Check them out at freedomfitnessequipment.com. Let's get rolling with today's show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to welcome Brandon Campbell Diamond or Basement Brandon, as some of you guys might know him. Welcome to the podcast, Brandon. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Ashton. Appreciate it. Thanks for actually getting my name right. Most people just assume it's Brandon Campbell, and I have to explain that. So we already knocked off one of the most commonly asked podcast questions. What's your name?
Very good. Very good. I'm gonna let you give a brief intro. So for those of the one or two people in this world that don't know you in the home gym space, can you give us a little bit of a brief background?
Yeah, sure. So I've been uploading YouTube related content around, I would say, training in general, a whole bunch of stuff for the last 12, 13 years. I've gone through a couple of phases in that. So initially started with supplement reviews when that was a lot less educated on the tubes, if you will, then got into more strength training, powerlifting type tips. And then as I built my home gym, I just started doing more reviews on gym equipment, just because, as I'm sure a lot of people out there know, these things are expensive, they're heavy, and it's not something you can usually find in a brick and mortar store, at least good quality ones. So when I was doing my purchasing process and vetting equipment, like a lot of us do, I just didn't find any resources online where you could actually see and hear how stuff works. So I started doing that just because I had some equipment. I just wanted to talk about it, and it got a lot of traction. And that's probably what I'm most well known for these days.
Nice. A lot of people are still getting into our article, but one of the reasons why I put Brandon as one of our top 10 garage gym review sites was because not only the quality of content, but it is, like you just said, it's actually relatively hard to find good, honest, and reliable reviewers like you who can actually go through and give a thorough diagnosis of good home gym equipment. So I was really surprised when I put that list together of how few. I had to scrounge around a lot. I'll just put it that way. It was really weird. So
yeah, I try to make it so there's a lot of great reviewers out there these days, and they do a great job going everything in depth. I think I tend to focus on stuff that a lot of people who aren't into gym equipment and probably well, that's being really nitpicky. But it's just I try to talk about from my experience, oh, you're doing this and this is kind of annoying. So just what to expect, because oftentimes you don't know until something shows up at your door.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Why did you decide to go into, so I know you said you were getting into that and you didn't find a lot of other people doing things similarly, but why did you keep going with the equipment reviews? Why didn't it just stop and you went back to, I know you still do powerlifting and training, but why didn't you go back to that exclusively?
So I think I would like to get more back into that type of content. The problem is at this point is I have so much stuff still that I have not yet talked about. So there's things that I've owned for well over a year and that I use, but because YouTube for me is just still a side passion project that I do in my free time, which I don't have a ton of these days, I just have a lot to get through. And that's one of the reasons why it's in some cases I feel obligated, hey, I need to get this video out versus do maybe some of the stuff that more interests me as of right now. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, because the more equipment reviews I do, either the more equipment people ask me to review, or the more companies want to send me stuff to review. Yeah. And then that list just keeps growing and growing and growing. So I've actually been trying to make a concerted effort to not take on as much outside of what I purchase myself, which is the majority of my equipment these days.
Very nice. I'm always curious about the behind the scenes work that people are doing as reviewers. And just from your perspective, what's the major perk and also the major downside of being in the gym and the equipment review space?
Yeah. So I would say the major perk is either getting some stuff for free or getting discounts on stuff. The problem with that is a lot of the stuff that people want to send you for free are stuff that is lower quality, I would say, because companies are like, hey, we want to just get our name out there. And this is basically cheaper than paying for advertising, which a lot of these videos tend to be. So I tend to turn a lot of that stuff down. Like I get emails every day of like, hey, can we send you this? And I'm just like, I'm not interested, because either I don't want it, I don't want to use it, or I know that there's nothing, there's more negative than I could say about positive.
Yep.
And I wouldn't want to be put in the position, like if they send it to me, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to give them the truth, but at the same time, it's not worth it for them. So I would say that's the best benefit, is getting some stuff. I've gotten some pretty big items at no cost to me with very little strings attached outside of, hey, just make a video and give us our feedback. But if someone like really wants to control the narrative, I'll usually will just turn that down. I also have the opportunity right now to help in the production of some stuff from some bigger companies. So there's a couple of barbells that I have from some well-known companies that I can't talk about because I've signed NDAs with them, unfortunately. But people asking me to be involved in the decision-making process of something that they're bringing to market is just something that's also really cool.
That's terrific. So they're not only are they testing the market, they're actually going to a reviewer like yourself to do. Are you going through stress testing with them, or just giving them advice on features?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay.
And in some of the instances where, and this is something that I talk about with people, like with going with something that's imported, which there's nothing wrong with getting something that's imported. But the problem is, what I've seen in production is a lot of the stuff that you see that's imported, like the first generation of that item is usually has some issues to be worked out. And what I think probably happens a lot of times is they'll get like one review copy in at the company, they'll test it out, and then they'll order X amount of units, and they get those units in, and it's either not of the same quality, or when they finally get enough people in-house to actually kind of use them, they notice that there's something that needs to be fixed or addressed. But the problem is, because all that's outsourced, that process is like done and paid for like 6 months ago to a year ago, versus like a domestic person who has something like in-house, can build it, can test it, and has it like can do real-time adjustments. That's why I like a lot of these smaller kind of startups that we've seen since COVID hit, where they're, you know, making stuff in-house and making adjustments based off community feedback, which is really cool to see.
Just out of wild curiosity, I don't know if you have any sense of where I know you're not an economist, but I am.
That was my major in college.
Oh, no way.
Got my bachelor's of science in economics, so I went the heavy math route in that as well, and haven't used it since.
You know, funny that I actually had the same degree. So I always have like sidebar interest in where our economy is heading, and I see recession on the horizon, but then I also get mixed signals. Do you think these smaller companies that popped up as a result of COVID are about to get hit in the face, especially on the new equipment side?
Yeah, so I think we're starting to see some of that, especially the ones that were importing stuff. I think it's a matter of where those companies got up and running. They saw some very good profits up front, and they just didn't realize that that was like a really weird market to be in. And I actually think we're seeing that now with, like, if you've seen, as of the time of this video, which is, you know, May 25th, like Frey Fitness has like a 50% off sale.
Yes.
My gut feeling is like they over ordered everything and have this warehouse that they're trying to clear out just because they have so much inventory. And we've seen stuff like bigger providers like Peloton, right? Everyone bought a Peloton when the gyms were closed, and they did great. And then they went and they spent all this money on inventory, on building new locations in this. And now we've seen the fact that they've basically having to cut everything. I just don't think people plan very well in advance. And that's also why one of the reasons people ask me, like, these days that are newer to my channel, hey, you know, why don't you do this full time? And it's like, yeah, things are great right now, but this, it's all like cyclical, like any other kind of market. And I think we're about to get the bubble pop, if not already being popped. So
I actually talked to Jeremy, the owner, who I didn't realize was the owner. I've been ordering from him, and I'm an idiot, so I never looked up who the owner was. So there was an 18-month lag time from China, and all the containers came in, and they just needed to liquidate inventory. And that, I think there's going to be other companies in that same situation. So it'll be interesting to see, because that'll bring the prices way the heck down on the import stuff in particular. on a slightly different top, well, still equipment related, but I love your aesthetic. I know everybody does, but the black and white and the Stormtrooper, and I'm a Star Wars nerd and I can't get away from it. But I'm curious, like, how did you come up with that aesthetic in the first place? Was that Apple inspired, or was that truly Star Wars, or like, how did that
Yeah,
come?
so Star Wars in a sense. So another interest that I have that is also a very small niche is I'm really into, and this is going to sound weird, I'm into like sports uniforms. So like
Oh.
history of uniforms, aesthetics that way.
Mhm.
And like I equate like the Stormtrooper look with some of the Miami Hurricanes looks of the past for their football team. I was like that. Now, I'm big into Star Wars as is too, and I like it. So it just kind of was a match made in heaven.
Mhm.
But as part of that, if you've watched my channel and seen my reviews and some of the stuff I do,
Mhm.
I think it's no surprise to label myself as anal when it comes to how aesthetics are.
Yep.
And so at the time when I bought that white Rogue rack, I had moved on from their bright blue, which a lot of people may remember or still kind of reminisce about. I was moving into a garage at the time. Bad for me, basement Brandon. But in the interim, I was like, I wanted something, and that was going to be a temporary rack, and then I was going to get kind of a bigger upgraded one down the road. I wanted something that was as neutral as possible. And obviously, like white's a very clean look because it can go with everything. And it was still different than just your standard black. So it started that way, and that kind of got the snowball rolling. It just so happened and then coincide with like the logo that I use for my channel and that kind of thing. And it just kind of extremely snowballed from there. And now I just have a equipment buying problem. So
Do you I know a lot of these companies for whatever reason, like red, blue, there's a lot of common colors. Are you finding issues with like getting white painted on stuff?
I don't think as much. And to me, it's funny because I kind of think of white as more of a classic color at first.
Yeah.
So like I remember with going into older school gyms and just seeing like white equipment everywhere, kind of like beat to death. And then it was like black, everything black, this like black hardware, that's cool. And then it was like, oh, that's kind of boring. Let's get into some more intense colors. And I do find that white was kind of thrown to the wayside, I think some. And I think if it's just in isolation, maybe people won't like it as much. But I think if you can really get that clean kind of white look with the black accents, I think it can pop. But I do think it's making a somewhat comeback. I don't think that's anything to do with what I have, though, unfortunately. I'd like to be like, oh yeah, I started the trend back for white, but it's not the case, I'm sure.
It is a really clean aesthetic. I absolutely love it. I've been trying to figure out if I wanted to go with on my own home gym, if I wanted to go with a multicolor theme kind of to match with our company, like red, white, and blue, or if I wanted to stick with like one uniform color. Oh, do you have any recommendations, by the way, on that? So if somebody was going to go with a particular color scheme, are there certain ones that are maybe easier to get your hands on if you're trying to start out with some basics and then eventually want to customize?
Yeah, I mean, I think from an ordering perspective, and I'd have to check because they change it all the time. If you're going to order from a company where you want something like that, Rep had been the easiest to do because you could basically pick your color uprights, your color cross members. I think a lot of companies will do that as well. You just have to take some extra initiative. So you have to call or you have to email or get it set up in advance versus just go to like kind of a real easy website integration thing. Cause like I know Rogue will do it and they'll do a lot of changes. Like for instance, on my rack, it's what we consider like an RM5, which is it's kind of like an off the menu item, but it's basically an RM3, a 30-inch depth rack with their 24-inch storage. You could just email them and say, hey, I want this configuration, and they'll set it up. But a lot of people these days just don't like talking to people and they want everything to be easy and online and no human interaction. So, but as far as colors go, I mean, that's the nice thing with any of these racks. I mean, they're all like adult Legos. You can swap stuff out at any time. And I started my rack with an RM3 and grew it to an RM5. I've added a ton of accessories. That's one of the nice things. That the only downside for that for people is it's going to start adding up in terms of shipping, because shipping is where you're probably going to get banged some. So while adding a cross member might not seem expensive, it might be like, let's say $90 for a pair of cross members, the shorter ones. It's then going to be like just as much as that in shipping. So it starts to add up, especially if you're doing it piece by piece versus buying all at once.
I did want to dive a little bit more into that, like custom gym setups, because I know everybody kind of drools over these Instagram setups. Your setup in particular looks fantastic. If somebody wanted to start creating that custom home gym and start with certain pieces. Are there certain aesthetic pieces to focus on that are, especially early on, are easier to acquire as custom? I know you've had some stuff made by like William Strength and all those guys, but that's are on a super high end price point.
Yeah. So there's some really easy, simple things people can do. In fact, I'm actually right before this call, I'm uploading a quick video to add some customization to your gym, which is basically just some like vinyl lettering. Nice. Right. So I redid some of the vinyl lettering on the wall behind my deadlift platform. You could also do stuff like with your own logo where you get the vinyl letters done. You could paint it. You could also get stuff like some vinyl adhesive. And a lot of equipment these days have like laser cutout logos in gussets for a rack or for benches. You could just get the color of your choice, like a contrasting color. So if you have a black bench, you could get like a red vinyl to basically put behind where that cutout is. Mm-hmm. And now you're starting to customize your color scheme to your gym. Another real easy one is that if you have a rack that comes with a logo gusset in the back, like a lot of the 1-inch racks do these days, but typically that logo is of the company you're buying from. You could get something like a magnet to cover it. You could cut it out yourself. You don't have to get something necessarily laser done, which is going to add to the cost, or layers of, plastic that end up being this fancy logo. There's a lot of workarounds. And one of the things that's funny is if you watch Coop from Garage Gym Reviews on his Coop squat, his Coop logo that he's done is actually like aluminum foil and like some poster board. So there's ways around it, especially if you're just posting it on Instagram. You just want some easy like customization. There's lots of little do-it-yourself hacks that you can do that will add a lot to your space and not cost you a lot of money.
I saw Plate Snacks is now, well, he actually got his own laser printer and now he's making like custom end caps and stickers for the decals that he's doing. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
Oh yeah. That's another thing. So I did that with some of my Boneyard bars, because if you get a Boneyard bar from Rogue, any kind of blemish bar from any company, typically the end caps are blank or they let you know it's a Boneyard. I went online and I made my basically own end cap with a vinyl sticker, relatively cheap, and now I have customized barbells. So it's really easy to do if you just take the time and effort. And I've seen a lot of people who have those kind of printers at home, maybe for work or for other stuff, and they could just bang out a bunch of stuff that's customized and kind of do it as they see fit, which is really cool to see.
It's really neat. The weight stacks that he's coming out with too. I don't know if you've seen those for like the plate loaded, or not plate loaded, what I'm saying, selectorized equipment is going to be amazing. I need to get some I might need to get some for some of the stuff in the warehouse just to spiff it up. Back to collabs with companies. I mentioned you had just recently done a piece with, I think it was William Strength. How do you get these collabs with these companies? Are you just emailing them and saying, hey, I'd love to offer you some free publicity. Would you be able to work with me? Or is it not as straightforward as that, or are they reaching back out to you?
Yeah, no. So a lot of the customized pieces, and for me, there's a couple aspects of customized. So like for William Strength, for Sornex, even through Rogue and stuff, where I'll have them do things for me, like my rack gusset logo. A lot of those companies are companies that their main focus isn't the home gym, but it's more facilities, schools, professional sports teams. That's kind of their bread and butter. However, most people in the home gym space don't want to pay the extra for that. So it usually comes at the premium of cost. So like things for like William Strength, it's a matter of just reaching out and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me with it? And most companies are more than willing to do so. I will warn people that the communication is also typically a lot slower unless you know somebody, which over time, I've kind of grown my network of people who are in this space. But that's a common complaint, right? For some of these companies, that number one, it's expensive. But also, hey, I put an email in asking for a question. I haven't heard anything back in like a couple of days. That's all normal. So that's one aspect of it. So easy way is, source people either make their own equipment, and there's some of those small startups that are domestic or even out in Canada, which I consider domestic, that can do that, or companies that cater more towards the facility side, because that's all about branding, logos and whatnot. But there's also customization in the aspect of getting your own equipment made to like your specs. So there are companies out there, so smaller ones that I've worked with that have done that. And I don't use the term smaller as any disservice to what they do, but just in comparison to like a big box Rogue or something like that. But like Oak Club Manufacturing has made stuff for me. Irwin Fitness, also another Canadian company. Stray Dog Strength might be able to custom make stuff. So a lot of companies are open. It's just, again, you have to go out and talk to people. It's not something that's necessarily on a website that's easy to accomplish.
That makes sense. You got to establish a relationship with them to work with you. Let's see. Oh, and again, back on that custom topic, I am curious if a listener who wasn't a reviewer like yourself and didn't have the social clout to do the collaboration or whatever it is, and they wanted to do something custom like this, who are some of the best companies that you think to work with for fitness equipment? I understand different companies have different niches, but I know some companies are better for like overall custom builds.
Sure. That could be a tough one depending on what the person wants. So again, if it's integration of logos and colors, pretty much anyone can do that. Okay. Even like the bigger boys of Rogue, it is just a matter of you have to reach out. It's going to be a longer process. You're going to work with somebody, but Rogue will do that. Williams Strength will do that. Elite FTS, which leverages Williams Strength for a lot of stuff, will also do that for you. Nice. So Elite FTS is a good one. I think a lot of people sleep on just because they tend to be their shipping isn't the best because they're actually a fairly small company in comparison. I think Dave Tate will also say that they're still a small company, but they'll do a lot of customizations, work with you for facility wise. And like the people that you watch, like on their podcast or stuff like that, and you hear about their writers, like they're the ones that come out and like do the installs and stuff. So if you're looking for a bigger aspect like that, I mentioned Oak Club, I mentioned Stray Dog, I mentioned Irwin Fitness. I'm sure there's other ones that I'm missing, but again, it doesn't, I would like to think I have some clout and maybe the time to respond to me is quicker than it would be just your average person, but it's still you have to reach out and establish those relationships. And I think that's the best way to do it. So I don't think there's a real barriers outside of if it's an import company. And the reason being is, again, it has to come over from a container and they typically don't do one-offs because they just have this big factory overseas that's pumping stuff off. And you typically don't see many customization options through them.
So you would say it would be better to order and do customizations from either equipment or companies that are purely based in the United States?
I would say so, from my experience.
Yep, that makes total sense. Let's see, I went through theme colors. Oh, I did want to ask you, you post this every so often. Speaking of SIP vibes and custom themes, you're a truck guy. And what's your ideal tricked out truck, or is it what you have right now?
So it is not what I have right now. I think if I could buy a truck more to my liking, I would probably start with something more of like a TRX or a Raptor. Okay. I kind of like the aggressiveness of how those look in the wider bodies. I have a Chevy Trail Boss, which is okay. It was probably more affordable. The ones I have though, the interior is very outdated. So I've actually done some stuff where like I swap out, the center console for one that has more of a bigger LCD screen from some of the different models and trims they have. So it's just like tinkering, right? It's like a gym equipment too. It's like I get something and then I tinker to add my own little flavor to it. But it's one of those things too, where I'm trying not to go too overboard because otherwise I'd end up with like, a 10-inch lifted truck on like 37s and like, I probably wouldn't be able to park it in my garage or drive it anywhere or would get any gas mileage. So it's just one of those things that for now it's holding my interest and helps me not spend all my money on the gym.
I mean, you could, Brandon, start your own truck channel. There is that.
Yeah. I've thought about that. I've thought about at least kind of doing some of those mods because it's also like a white and black theme. And I've done like a couple swap outs of it too. But it's just one of those things where it's just like, I don't really have the time. I don't even have time to make YouTube videos half the time, let alone truck videos. And literally, I'm lucky enough or fortunate enough to do most of my normal corporate work from home, especially post-COVID. Like I don't travel hardly anywhere near what I used to. And I have my gym in the basement. I live in Rhode Island, which is the smallest state in the United States. Everything's really close. So like, I think I put like the first year I had that truck, I think I put 3,000 miles on it. Wow. And it's literally just like dump runs from equipment, like getting rid of pallets, getting rid of styrofoam, getting rid of excess cardboard that wouldn't fit in our recycling bin. So that's basically, it's a glorified dump runner truck. So
well, it's good.
Great use of money. Yeah. Good purchase on my part.
keep it in immaculate condition. Might as well
That's
do it
right.
that way. Back to manufacturing for one second. Just in terms of what you've seen in the industry, I'm always curious about Rogue and whether or not they're going to get knocked off their throne. Who do you think is most likely to accomplish that? I don't know what time frame. And do you think Rogue is slipping at all now?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that in reverse. So, because I see a lot of people like on Instagram, on Facebook pages, on Reddit pages, on the Home Gym Discord, people getting equipment from Rogue that is not up to the previous quality or what people expect it to be. And I do think that that has been a real issue since COVID. I think part of that is they're trying to get out as much equipment as possible with the higher demand, that their production times are probably getting pushed through, which means their quality control probably isn't as good as what it used to be, because it's like, hey, we need this product, let's just push it through. I also think that they may have likely changed some of their customer service reps or had to hire more people or replace people, and the customer service level isn't the same. Whereas if you had an issue, chances are they almost always gave you some sort of refund or they would replace it. Where now, from both my own experience and what other people have showed me, it's more of, oh yeah, that's to be expected, or no, that's normal wear and tear. That's just how it is. So I think that's a problem, but in the grand scheme of things, is someone going to replace them? I don't think so. And I think they're so massive that they sell so much. And I was thinking about this actually last night, oddly enough, is let's just say, for example, you're comparing Rogue to like a smaller company, and, Rogue might have a 5% chance of, let's say, you getting some kind of item that's not up to your liking, damaged, whatever the case may be, chipped in shipping, poor packaging, whatever. And then you're comparing it to a smaller company, which might have, let's just start a weird number, like a 50% chance of that happening. Rogue just does so much more volume that their 5% and the amount of people that buy it and will talk about it just seem to outweigh the company that's, at a 50% clip. So I think they're still performing extremely well, but I also think they just do so much business and they're so well known that you just tend to see it more often, which makes you just think it happens more often. But I think they're just such a massive giant, in addition to the equipment they do, the athletes they sponsor, the events they sponsor, from strongman to CrossFit. And not only do they offer their own equipment, but they sell stuff from like Nike, Adidas, Reebok, all those main people. I just don't see another company dethroning them, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lose some market share, just because, as you've mentioned earlier, with all these other companies popping up, there's just more people to try to take a piece of that pie, which over the course of several companies will probably be a couple percentage drop points in the market, I would think.
Yeah, and it may not be that much, especially if they've got market dominance and all of those companies end up falling off due to COVID anyway, like we were talking earlier. I am curious to see how many of, there's going to be a culling of the fitness industry at some point, and either a culling or a consolidation. I'm not sure which. And I think Rogue's going to either scoop them up or they're just going to die off.
Right. And it's hard to see, right? Because I don't think any of those companies are publicly traded, especially some of the smaller ones. So it's hard to tell who's actually doing what.
Yeah.
But my also assumption is Rogue is probably putting a lot more money into R&D than a lot of these other companies are as well. Because other companies' R&D is, hey, what's Rogue doing? Let's copy it. Which Rogue is not also, innocent of. They do have their own things as well that looks like copies, but like I said, I still just don't see that anytime soon, if ever, potentially.
Yep. No, it's totally fair. I want to talk a little bit about your powerlifting career, because I know you love. You just went to a competition. I think you did really well. What was your? I'm sorry, I should have watched the video, or maybe I didn't. I forgot. How did you place in that? How did you do?
Yeah. So in terms of placing, I placed well, but I don't put a lot of, funny enough pun, I don't put a lot of weight into that, only because, like, for these local meets, you don't know who's going to show up one day. Like, it could be that you're in a meet where it just so happens a national record holder shows up, or it could be the case where you show up and you're the only person in your weight class and you still get like a participation trophy of first place. But I did well for me. So that's what I like about powerlifting, right? Is because you can always, no matter who shows up, you always have your previous total or your next total, and you can kind of see where you stack up. So for me, I hit a squat of 606 pounds. I'll keep it pounds because it's easiest, especially given the name of this podcast. I'll keep it in imperial units. So 606 for squat, 325 for bench, which is not my best lift, and then deadlift was 628. And I did that at a body weight of 200 and just under 214 pounds. So for me, it ends up being like a Wilks PR and a Dots PR. And I think I was like 5 pounds off my all-time best PR. Which I think that total ends up being like 1560 or 1565, which for me at 41 years old, I'll take it as a big win. So
yeah,
went well.
Awesome. And just from a training perspective, I know you made the switch, you said earlier, from the garage to the basement, but did that really impact anything from a training perspective? And also I am curious, like why the shift? Why didn't you stay in the garage?
Yeah. So basically what happened is I've built my first home gym in, I want to say 2014, 2015 in the basement. Cause at the time we did not have a garage in the house. It was just, we did not have a garage as part of our house, I should say, which is fairly common in Rhode Island, oddly enough. So the basement was the place to be, but ideally I would have done basement anyway, just because it offers more room than a garage would, AKA my wife would let me use the basement, whereas she probably wouldn't let me use the garage otherwise. But we ended up deciding to build a new house because we were looking to expand our family, and I was working from home more than when we had bought that house. So we needed a couple extra bedrooms, an office, and things like that. So we ended up having to move to a rental, which was very, very small. As part of that, I didn't have access to a basement to put a gym in. And I actually did not think I was going to be able to have a home gym because the place we were renting from, they were going to use the garage as storage for their other stuff. It was like almost like a furnished rental. And we said, we don't want any of your furniture. We have all our stuff. And they said, all right, we're just going to put it in the garage, which meant I didn't have anything. So I actually sold all my equipment for the most part. Oh, wow. When we first moved into that rental, but then things changed. They said, hey, you can actually use the garage. It was a single stall garage. My wife said, I know the gym's important to you. Go ahead and use it. So that's why I did it. And then when we built our house, I actually built our basement with taller than usual ceilings. So we did a deeper foundation pour. So we have 9-foot ceilings in our basement. We do have a garage in this house, which I parked the truck in. We talked about, my wife parks in there, and we basically hold all of our kids' stuff. But for me, a basement is just more ideal because also you can control the temperature a little bit better than a garage, right? In Rhode Island, we kind of get all the seasons where in the summer it gets kind of hot, not like Texas hot. In the winters, it gets cold, probably more cold than it does hot. So in the basement, I think as is, the coldest it gets is around 60 degrees and the warmest it gets is around 70 degrees. So it's kind of a real nice spot for me. But I have nothing against the garage. And as far as training goes, it's about the same. And I think the good thing about the garage is the smaller space that I had. It kind of goes to show you, even now, though I have this really big, way too expensive setup, probably way more stuff than you need in a home gym. For powerlifting style training, all you really need is a rack, a bench, and a bar. So you can really get a lot done in a small space with little to no equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. The things people have done with single stalls has been absolutely incredible, especially with the wall mount systems that they've been coming out with even more frequently now since COVID. You mentioned climate control, and I'm assuming since the basement is underground, it's just naturally more even keeled as far as temperature is concerned. But do you have any recommendations? Because I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about this in the review space. Any good climate control systems, whether you're in the garage or whether you're in the basement, that you found that are really effective for really any space?
Yeah. So for me in my time, and so my basement now, we actually have our HVAC down there. So we do have heating and cooling. I haven't had to use it just because it's well insulated. Okay. But even something like a cheap ceramic heater that kind of oscillates is something that I used in my old basement and in the garage as well. So if it gets cold, I mean, and it doesn't do a huge difference, but it might change the temperature anywhere up to like 10 degrees. So that's a fairly big swing. I think for anyone, the easiest thing you can do is just dress more appropriately. So whether that be more layers, less layers, whatever. or some sort of an oscillating fan. And interestingly enough, one of the companies that have reached out to me recently is this thing called the following fan, which basically has like a motion tracker in it. And where you walk, the fan will oscillate to point at you. It's probably overpriced for most people, but it was an interesting thing. But I think unless you're in a severe environment, like I said, like maybe Southern Texas or something like that, where you're dealing with the temperature degrees of like 100 or so, you can get away with just like a fan or whatever, or a small kind of portable unit, especially because those spaces tend to be a little bit smaller. But if it's something that, it's really pushing the limits, then someone could invest in a more kind of controlled system, but that's going to add quite a bit of cost to the equation.
Is there anything that you found? Because I know with those portable AC units, you have to stick the little tube out something to exhaust the hot air. Have you found anything that's appropriate for garages where you can kind of, I don't know, jet it underneath the garage door without it cracking open so much?
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but to be honest, I haven't looked too much into that. One of the things I have in my basement now is I have a dehumidifier.
Yeah.
So a lot of people just don't think about humidity, and especially if you have a bunch of like bare steel bars or other metal equipment that can oxidize with humidity. Like in my first basement, I didn't pay any attention to it, so I didn't run one. But in this basement that I'm in now, I'm like, you know what? Just going to run it and see what it is. And the humidity down there got to be like 70%. And typically, I think for most garages or basements or space, you probably want like 55% or lower. So I run a dehumidifier all the time, and it's one with an auto pump. So I'm not emptying any buckets. And luckily, again, because I have an HVAC system down there, I just run a little hose from that unit to my HVAC where it just can dump automatically whenever it needs be. Nice. And I guess that's a way of me skirting your answer or your question by basically not knowing the answer. So.
It's okay.
Change the subject. Distract.
Distract. Just wait. I think that's an area that's still underdeveloped in the home gym space, honestly. Like I said, unless you're in a basement where it's already climate controlled, or I know Adam's got like 3 interior facing walls, which is really nice. And that's pre-insulated. But I'm curious if there's companies that are going to come out more with, like you said, that motion tracking system or something to keep it continuously cool, at least climate control it better. Because all the stuff I've seen is basically workarounds, like big box fans, more big box fans, portable AC unit. Like it's all, I don't know. I feel like there's a better solution. I haven't been able to come up with one yet. So I'll keep looking.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably like a Band-Aid, right? Unless you want to sink the money into getting something actually installed, which a lot of people don't want to do. So yeah, it's what trade-off do you want to have to deal with?
It's expensive too. Powerlifting popularity too. The surveys I've seen from Jake at Garage Gym Experiment are interesting because I'm seeing trends like you're invested in powerlifting. I think that's very much a home gym thing. But have you seen a decline in say CrossFit popularity, which I feel like was all the rage even as of 5 years ago, and this surge in say maybe strongman or powerlifting? Or is it kind of I don't know, where do you see that going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so like most answers, I think it's going to depend. So I think part of it for me is not so much decline in some of those things, but more of I tend to put my focus on the things that interest me. Whereas like if I was interested in, let's say, CrossFit, probably see a lot of CrossFit content across my way, or people doing it, because I know it's still extremely huge. My wife actually went to high school with one of the founders of Noble, who are big into the CrossFit. So I see a lot of stuff that he does kind of behind the scenes, and I just know they're growing tremendously fast. So it's still there. I think in general, it's not so much about one thing necessarily sinking or declining in popularity. I think it's just more things rising up too. Like I think right now strongman's pretty popular, or more popular than it's been recently. I think a big part of that is just it's getting more pub, wherein before it might have just been, you see the Metrex World's Strongest Man on ESPN at some like weird hour. But now it's like things that they're getting like pushed to ESPN, like primetime. You're seeing stuff like Rogue do it at the Arnold. You also see a couple of years ago, and even still today, there was a big kick in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as kind of like a sidecar to a lot of people's fitness. And there's a meme about that. I'm sure, like a power lifter to BJJ guy. But I kind of see a little bit of everything. I think from a home gym standpoint, you see a lot of popularity for power lifting because, again, as we stated, the equipment need is so low versus, let's say, like if someone's super into bodybuilding, that's typically where they're going to want more machines and a lot more variety as well. They don't want to just squat, bench, and deadlift. They want to be doing all sorts of stuff. So I think in that case, a lot of people still tend to prefer a gym environment for it. But yeah, I don't see a decline in any, especially in powerlifting. I think it's just getting more prevalent now that there's also more federations within powerlifting here in the States, with Powerlifting America versus USAPL and the IPF, and that stuff's actually coming up their championship. So you'll be seeing more about it. And again, I think it's just a very low barrier to entry. You also have guys out there like Joe Gray running the Garage Gym competition, which is basically, that free online powerlifting. And oh, by the way, you can win $30,000 worth of crap. So it's like, it's no barrier to entry and people enjoy it. And a lot of people are doing those movements anyways. So I think all those things will continue to grow.
Gotcha.
To be honest, I don't see a decline.
Considering you're mostly on Instagram and YouTube, why didn't you choose bodybuilding? Why did you choose powerlifting?
Yeah. So, if I was doing bodybuilding, I'd probably have to have a TikTok. I had to delete.
That's true.
I signed up for a TikTok because a couple of my friends were on it, and being a 41-year-old married man with 2 kids, I started browsing just the suggested feeds. I was like, nope, this is bad for business. I got to get off of this thing. So I actually, when I first started training, I trained for sports, and then when sports ended, I actually was into more hypertrophy style training. Mm-hmm. But what I found was I just got bored of it because it was like volume. I wasn't on any specific set program in terms of periodization, like with intensities and volume. It was basically just do the same exercises, just try to do more volume with a little bit more weight each time. And I kind of just got burnt out. And when I found powerlifting, I was like, oh, this is a way to push your strength, which I always found very interesting coming from a sports background. But it also offered a more competitive aspect for me. When I say for me, because obviously with bodybuilding, there's competitions, but I think most people who would say train for bodybuilding, I would say there's a very low percentage who actually compete, even lower than the powerlifting side of it. Mm-hmm. And also with that, the competitions to me for bodybuilding are very much more subjective, where you could say, oh, this guy looks better than that guy, but this guy won. And there's like politics. With powerlifting, it's more cut and dry. There's still politics involved and there's still judging involved, which can be argued against, but it's easier to judge and compare yourself meet to meet versus show to show. Because I mean, you could be training bodybuilding, like take a look at some of the better natural bodybuilders out there, like Alberto Nunez. He's been training for 30 years and he posted like a 10-year transformation. And like, I can't really see the difference for the most part. Like there's a striation here where there wasn't before. And there's that, and that's no discredit to him. It's just a super big investment for not a big payoff for me. So this doesn't hold my interest as much.
That's fair.
But I will say any good powerlifting program should have hypertrophy and bodybuilding style blocks built into it.
Yeah, I would imagine, especially during off season or in between blocks, kind of like you're doing now with some of the accessory work.
Exactly right.
On that subject, best bar you've ever come across for powerlifting. Can you name one? I know there's a ton. I do.
Yeah. So I give the very vanilla answer for this. And that is a Rogue Ohio power bar. And let me explain why I say that. There are better bars out there. There are much better bars out there. However, I think for most people, getting a Rogue Ohio power bar, which is going to run you somewhere between $270 for a bare steel and $400 for a stainless steel, those numbers might be off, but let's just say on average, $300. You can get a bar that's built very well, that has a lifetime warranty, that has a knurling that's going to be grippy, yet it's not going to eat your hands up. Also not going to be too passive for people. You can get that in bare steel, stainless steel, Cerakote, black zinc. Sometimes they have like weird, like black oxide versions or something like that too. I've seen every now and then. You can get it in a 45-pound variant. You can get it in a 20 kg variant. You can get it customized now with your own stuff on it. But it has every single flavor that you would want. And it's an affordable bar versus, let's say, like a lot of people that I talk to say, oh, the Kabuki Power Bar is the best bar, which I have a Kabuki. It's great and it's good, but it also costs twice as much.
Yeah.
You take a look at a Eleiko Power Bar, that's like $1,100 to $1,200. Fantastic bar. But again, I take into account price and usability and also flavors, if you will, of what you can get, availability, warranty, that kind of thing. So I think Ohio Power Bar for me is probably the best bar for most people.
Do you personally I'm a huge fan of this, the super aggressive, almost like, I don't know if you've touched like the Elite FTS Power Bar, the Iron Cowboy. Do you like those kind of knurls? Or are you looking for something more volcano style, more passive?
Yeah, so it depends. So I would call the Ohio Power Bar knurl my daily driver. So and this is like a conversation I have with people all the time. It's like when we talk aggressive, to me, aggressive means how deep that knurl is cut.
Yep.
Right. So the from top to bottom, how deep that is. You could have aggressive grippy, which is like a volcano style knurl.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have aggressive sharp, which is like a mountain style knurl. You then get into different things too with I don't recall the technical term. It's like the pitch basically of square inch or whatever. How much knurl is it within a given area? Is it a very fine knurl in terms of small, close together, like a Kabuki Power Bar? Is it a bigger knurl like the Rogue Agro 3X? That it all kind of plays a difference. To me, generally speaking, I do like what you would consider aggressive, slightly sharp bars. I say that because even though I like a sharp barbell, if you're doing like a heavy single or you're doing like, a meet, you want that because you only have to have your hands or your back on that bar for a couple attempts, versus it's hard to have that as a training bar because you will eat your shit up. Excuse my language. Like you'll get your back cut up, your hands cut up, and it's not very comfortable. And I know a lot of people who compete on a world level who don't like those competition bars just because they find that they can't use it every day, day in and day out. And they'll prefer something that's more of like that grippy aggressive instead.
It's interesting you say that because I've switched over to one of the ones that actually coincidentally we sell. It's the Iron Cowboy. I think they call it the Kansas Power Bar as well. And I thought I was going to really like the super, super aggressive knurl. And I do, but I think I'm finding out, I'll probably give it a couple more weeks. But I did have the Kabuki Power Bar and I was like, this almost feels passive to me at this point, and I wanted something sharper. But man, dude, the mountain knurl is no joke. Like that is raw.
Yeah. And that's something that, again, when you have that conversation with people, right, it's not only that, but also like what kind of finish is on the bar. So like for me, my Kabuki Power Bar is in the electroless nickel, which I don't think they offer anymore. And they have issues with nickel plating in general, which feels good, right? Mm-hmm. It's not super aggressive, but then I have their Duffalo bar, which has the same neural pattern, but that's in black oxide, and it's a night and day difference between the two. So it also depends on what kind of finish you're going with, as that can obviously impact how those bars feel.
Yeah, because I know Cerakote fills that stuff more. Is it black oxide or stainless that has the least kind of infill effect?
Yeah. So stainless or raw is going to be the least. Black oxide is still like a finish. It's a very light finish though, so it doesn't have great oxidation protection.
Okay.
And I like black oxide because, again, it kind of gives the bar a cool look being black, but double-edged sword because it doesn't provide a lot of resistance, and in some cases that finish is going to wear in time. So if it's going in like a commercial space, it's going to wear pretty bad. So for most people, if you can afford it, like stainless to me gives you the best options. You typically lose some of that actual tensile strength because it's a softer metal. Mm-hmm. Or you can go bare steel, which would be great. But again, if you live in a high humidity area, you're going to have to keep up on that some more. So there's always kind of pros and cons to no matter what finish you go with.
Sure. I know at one point you were working on your own Basement Brandon custom barbell. Have you had to scrap that, or is that still in the works?
Yeah, so I have to massage this message a little bit. So I am consulting on a bar for a company. They want my input on it, which is cool. I am not one to attach my name to it, at least at this point, just because it is an imported bar. And again, as we talked about earlier, sometimes what you get from a test copy to an actual copy is not the same. Mm-hmm. And one of the issues I've seen with import equipment in general is manufacturers change on the back end all the time, and you might not be aware as a consumer. So you might get like a run of bars, which are great, and then they change manufacturing or something different happens on their end, and you don't know about it until it's already shipped to the customer. And then you're like, well, this isn't as good as the one that you showed. So it's always kind of a slippery slope in that regard. But that being said, where we are in that, I actually just got an email from them the other day to confirm my address and the actual bar weight, because they wanted to know if we wanted to settle on 45 pounds or 20 kg. So going back and forth with them. But one of the process, again, with the import side of it, is it's a slow process, because they're basically having to go back to China, I'm assuming, get all the specs, have the bar made, ship it over here as part of some container. So it's coming on a boat, and it just takes time to do it. The company gets their hands on it and kind of reviews it before they send it out to me. And it's just a really long turnaround, especially when it's like right now, it's basically like a one-off. Like they're not going to go into full production. So it's at a lower concern to them, but it's still in the works, but we'll see. We've had to make a lot of concessions, because initially we were looking at doing a fully stainless bar at a price that would have been somewhat competitive. But then as prices went up, it basically added like $100 to $150 to the price, which put it at around like 500 or so, which for a fully stainless bar in today's market is not outrageous, especially given some of the specs we're looking to hit on it. But coming from maybe a not as well-known company, or coming from the import side of the house, that to me is a no-go, because my idea to help them was to create kind of the best daily driver for most people. So we had to make some concessions in that. And I'm still not sure how it's going to turn out, which is why I've been really vague on who's making it and what it's going to be at the end of the day. So still in progress.
Have you thought about working with a US based company, or is that just going to drive the cost up even further if you were to do that?
So I don't know. I haven't actually looked into it. I do have right now in my possession a bar made by a US based company that is unique in terms of what they typically offer, that I'm basically consulting on, and I'm trying to get them to release it and or take some of my feedback, which I haven't been getting good response on. So I don't know if it's ever going to come to light or not. But a lot of companies, even like I've worked with Rogue on products before, it's like you're consulting or advising versus actually deeply ingrained in the process. So they have like their own teams that are doing stuff. And even though like I give some feedback, which I would find helpful and I think they should do, they probably consider it, but at the end of the day, they're going to do what they want to do. And I actually saw something really similar, that if you remember a couple of years back when Reebok came out with those CrossFit Light TRs, at the time they were called, basically what is now known as the Power Shoe. Super popular ones that were made basically in conjunction with Mark Bell and Jesse Burdick. They had the same problems, right? Is like they had this input, and then Reebok came over the top and said, all right, we're going to take these shoes that you basically designed for powerlifters. We're going to call them CrossFit trainers, which is like alienating your main audience as is. And instead of coming out with like red, blue, green, they're like, we're going to come up with these funky designs that probably no one's going to be interested in. And not surprisingly, the shoes didn't do well on a mass appeal, but they had a very strong following on the powerlifting side. And even now you can find them on eBay. People are selling like used versions for twice what they retailed for. So it's one of those things though, but even for them, like as part of the process, especially as a consultant, people don't always take your word as they probably should.
Yeah. No,
they want help, but they don't want help.
If you need recommendations, by the way, with for other barbell companies that you could potentially work with, I'm not saying you would, but I've got a couple of guys you may not have heard of that I can recommend. So just keep that back in mind in the future.
Yeah, no, and that would be cool too. But I think the problem in my very early looking into it is a lot of people like white label stuff, right? So it's like it's basically you go through a provider who's going to let you label it as your bar, but it's still their bar with your label versus, to your spec. It's kind of coming off the assembly line regardless and changing the end cap. So but maybe we can talk about that offline. That'd be cool.
Sure. A couple of final questions for you, just on the specifically on the review side. I noted you as one of the top gym equipment review sites anywhere on the internet, on YouTube in particular, and also obviously on Instagram. But what do you personally want to see more of in the review space? Whether it's here's the reason I'm asking this. The more I dig into I'll just say it, folks like Garage and Reviews, the more I'm finding out that there are other things that are driving the review. And let me be clear, people need to make money. People need to be incentivized to do reviews. Otherwise, they're not going to happen. So I have nothing against that. What I do have an issue with is when people are not disclosing these kinds of things and they're reviewing stuff like tonal over and over and over again, then nobody's going to buy. So what's, like, what kind of changes or things do you want to see in the review space overall that you're kind of trying to shift?
Yeah. So that's something that's kind of, I wouldn't say grinding my gears, but I'm aware of being in this space as well. And I'm sure I've been guilty of it in the past. So one of the things that I try to do with my stuff is I try to, number one, not take on stuff that I wouldn't use or wouldn't necessarily recommend. So I don't take on stuff just because I can get an affiliate code or paid review for it.
Yeah.
But I also try to, instead of just doing reviews necessarily, again, as we talked about, I kind of just give my feedback in terms of this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And I always try to spin it both ways. Like, this is what this product would be good for. Also, this is what it's not good for, and kind of give you kind of both sides of the story. And my goal isn't to necessarily sell somebody on something, but just help them make a more informed decision. So I'm assuming that if they're watching the video, they're likely interested in this product. And I just try to give them that piece of, this is what to be aware of, and this is how it's going to do well or not do well in some cases. Personally, and this is more probably my own aspect of it, I dislike these really long form reviews that I see from people, which kind of goes against it, right? Because I'm a reviewer, you want like in-depth stuff, you want the context. In some cases, I don't, especially when it's something that doesn't need super in-depth review, like if it's a barbell necessarily, or even some of this equipment. Like for me, if a review is over, I'd say 5 to 10 minutes is a sweet spot for me, because that's my attention span. Like, I don't want to watch a 20-minute video on certain things. And like, even if that, at least some people kind of get with the program and put like timestamps in the description so you can skip the stuff. But I just want to see more concise, to the point stuff. And also, how do I say this? I'm trying to think that I just want to see more raw reviews versus stuff that seem like, and again, I'm probably guilty of this too at times. Now I'm not, because I'm just lazy and I don't want to spend the time editing and all this, but a lot of things seem overproduced and almost not as authentic as they used to be across the board. Because again, people are trying to put on a show and they want to move equipment. They want you to use their affiliates, which I get.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of loses some of that appeal, which for me, for YouTube, and a reason I subscribe to a ton of channels that have like maybe 100 subs or less overall, just because I'm looking for that kind of honest, just feedback versus a show or a production. So I'd like to see kind of people take a step back and not over edit their videos necessarily.
Awesome. I like that. Do you ever see do you like this as, I'll call it a side, it's much more than a side gig in my mind for you, but do you always see this as something that you would like to do on the side where your main job is your focus? Or have you ever considered moving into full-time, or like really like pushing on this a lot?
No. So, and this year, especially if I would, it would have been this year, I made significantly more than my normal corporate job, which I've basically been doing the same corporate type stuff for the last 20 years. The too long didn't read version is I work for probably one of the largest IT type companies in the world. I can just say I work for Dell. I don't care that people know Dell, but so Dell's really large. I've worked for them the last 10, but in the same space for the last 20.
Wow.
So I have the experience, and I've gone through a couple other companies, couple positions. So it's not like I'm not well compensated.
Yeah.
I made a lot more this past year through YouTube and a lot of the referrals and stuff that I do.
Wow.
But to me, it's still something that I look as a hobby, because it's fun. It's something I do in my free time. And at the same case, I never worry about it. Meaning, I don't feel like I have to put up a video. I don't feel like I have to overly sell something because I want someone to click on an affiliate. Like if they do, that's great and it helps. I just end up spending it more on my gym, which kind of just eats into itself. But it's still something that I regularly enjoy doing. And if I didn't enjoy it, I would just stop, and I don't feel like I would have to continue it for the sake of making a living. So I still like how that plays out for me.
I do too. I think I like that balance too, because it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't give you any sort of pressure to perform necessarily. Last question. You knew this was coming. It's a question you get asked everywhere you go, every podcast you've ever been on. It's the burning question. People always want to know. You knew it was just a matter of time. What's with your poverty bench press?
Got long arms, damn it. You should have seen how much I benched in high school. I would like to spin it and say I don't have a poverty bench press. My squat and deadlift are just fantastic. I thought it was going to be a 35s question. We avoided that one.
I tricked you there, Brandon. I would never ask something like that. How dare I?
Perfect.
Nice. Your powerlifting numbers are incredible. I am super, super impressed, especially what's the golden years considered in powerlifting? Like 30s or something? They say 35 is peaking.
Yeah, I would say that's like the general impression. But if you look at a lot of the lifters these days, they're in their late 20s to early 30s. And most of them, based off what I've seen on social media, don't plan to continue powerlifting into their 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
So my motto, and I told this people at my last meet, my motto these days is outlive to outlift. So I'm just going to be like the oldest person there where no one else is going to be competing against me, and I'll eventually be the best.
That seems to be most of what it is in powerlifting, because people blow out their knees, blow out their back, do really stupid stuff. It seems like you've done a really good job of keeping yourself healthy throughout the training cycle. Even I've had issues like low back pain and just screwing up form and that kind of stuff, because I've done stupid things and overloaded or not been watching or stretching carefully. So yeah, I feel like outlasting most lifters is what gets people to really good numbers and longevity.
Yeah. See, that's my strategy. I'm never overly successful, so that way I can never fall off. Because I've seen a bunch of power lifters who have success and they get hurt, or they have a setback and then they get frustrated because they can't do what they used to. So they end up quitting powerlifting. Not me. Underachieve all the time. And just longevity, consistency.
Just keep going right underneath top.
That's right. That's right. Set the bar low, you'll never fail.
I love it. Well, Brandon, I will let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to give you a chance to plug anything you wanted to plug, YouTube channel, Instagram, all that good stuff. So go for it.
Oh, there's a lot I want to plug. There's also my Instagram handle on YouTube that I want to talk about. So yeah, if you guys want to follow me, it's just Basement Brandon everywhere. I try to get that as consistent as possible. If you're ever checking out on any website, sports or equipment related, Basement may or may not save you money. I just try to keep it simple, nothing like that. So even if you don't like me, at least you can save some money. And if you really don't like me, want to save some money, just DM me and I will give you somebody else's code so you can use it.
There you go. Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on, Brandon. I really appreciate your time, and best of luck with the review space and powerlifting in general. You're killing it, and I really admire the work that you're doing. So really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashton. Good to talk to you.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please give Freedomcast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean a lot to our business. Plus, it's fun to read y'all's reviews. See you next time.